The alien telepaths touched his mind, then screamed. Caleb Rourke didn't resist. He overpowered them with pure, lived pain. One lit match, one cold smile. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The Zarn believed they had perfected conquest, not through strength of arms, but through mastery of fear. Their doctrine was precise, clinical, and devastatingly effective. Dissolve the enemy from within. No guns, no gore, just the quiet erosion of sanity triggered by the most intimate of weapons, dread. Their gas, neurofear, was a molecular phantom. Designed to bypass the logical brain, it tunneled straight into the amygdala and ruptured emotional stability like a virus. The victims didn't know they'd been hit until it was far too late. Trembling hands, racing hearts, hallucinated footsteps in empty halls. Entire city-states would fall to pieces without a shot fired. And the Zarn? They would simply walk in and claim ownership over the ruins. Captain Jerox was proud of this legacy. From the command deck of the Zarn battleship Vigilant Mercy, he loomed over Earth like a god examining his next sacrificial flame. His posture was perfect, tall, coiled, and predatory. His second-in-command adjusted the dispersal parameters, antennae flicking nervously. "Release is confirmed," the officer murmured. "Atmospheric penetration in 12 seconds. Jerox's voice oozed certainty. "By the third rotation, they'll beg us to end their nightmares." Below, on Earth's surface, the impact was immediate. Montana's military outpost, once considered a fallback citadel, fractured under the invisible weight. Veterans collapsed mid-patrol, rifles clattering against concrete. One private clawed at his face, convinced spiders were crawling beneath his skin. A field nurse locked herself inside a storage closet and wouldn't come out, weeping that the moon was breathing. Command relays turned into sobbing fits and incoherent screams. Panic was a contagion, and fear had found its ideal host. Except, there was one place it couldn't land. Sector 17B, a half-gutted transport depot repurposed into a fallback bunker. The walls groaned in the wind like a haunted ship, but inside, amid the flickering emergency lights and the flickering psyches of its defenders, one man stood, unmoved. Caleb Rourke. He didn't wear a uniform. He didn't even carry a proper weapon, just a rusted-out revolver and a crowbar duct-taped to a sledge handle. His file had been flagged for emotional volatility, post-industrial trauma, and multiple incidents of workplace violence. But as the neurofear thickened the air like a psychic fog, Caleb drew a deep breath, eyes closed, shoulders relaxed. Then came the smile. "Smells like home," he said, with a gravel rasp that turned the bunker's silence into stunned awe. And somewhere, in a corner behind a row of cots, a young recruit who had just soiled himself whispered, "He's not afraid." No one yet understood why, but they would. To the Zarn, resistance was a statistical anomaly, an outlier, something to be corrected, not feared. Their entire doctrine, finely tuned over centuries of planetary conquests, was built on the premise that fear was universal, that all thinking life, when pressed hard enough in just the right places, would fold, collapse, comply. And yet, here was a single human, a biological crude hammer by their standards, standing untouched in a storm of madness they themselves had engineered. Captain Jerox watched the footage again, this time in slow motion. Caleb Rourke emerged from the haze like some urban myth forged in smoke and rust. His comrades writhed around him, eyes wide, gasping as the neuro-fear devoured their minds. But Caleb, he was dragging them one by one out of the cloud's core, humming a rhythm that didn't match any Zarn audio pattern. Something guttural, primitive, His lips moved in cadence to the words, "Lose yourself in the music." It wasn't defiance, it was familiarity. Jerox's mandibles clicked in irritation. This wasn't immunity, it was exposure. Prolonged, chronic exposure. This creature had lived inside fear, swallowed it, breathed it, slept beside it. Neuro-fear didn't break Caleb because it was less terrifying than his past. That made him dangerous. The extraction order went out within the hour. 5 elite Zarn operatives, bred in sensory deprivation tanks and trained in fear-harvesting raids across 13 systems, were dispatched to collect him. Jerox didn't want him dead. He wanted him under glass. They never made it back. What they did send, moments before signal loss, was a single data stream, a live feed from a hovering drone. In the center of the screen stood Caleb Rourke, shirt stained with mud and blood, smoke curling from the corner of his mouth. He didn't run. He didn't raise a weapon. He just looked into the camera like he knew who was watching. "You want me?" he said, low and flat. "Come on down. I'll show you what we do to monsters in Detroit." Transmission cut. On Earth, chaos was metastasizing. Governments issued hollow orders over jammed channels. Cities became shadows of themselves. But the rumors, they traveled. There was a man who breathed fear like it was factory dust. A man who fought when others wept. And in the ruined heart of what had once been a nation, people were walking. Not fleeing, walking, toward Caleb Rourke, because monsters had landed on Earth, and Earth had sent one back. Desperation had a stench, not that the Zarn could smell it, not through their slick membranes and precision-bred sinuses, but Earth reeked of it, or rather, it should have. The neuro-fear protocols had failed. The saturation was now 1,000 times baseline levels. Fields of gas shimmered over every major continent like auroras of dread. Chemical variants, experimental strands, some laced with targeted hallucinations, others designed to mimic ancient Earth phobias, all deployed in a final, frantic barrage, and still they failed. Inside the expanding safe zone, laughter rang out. Real, unchained laughter. Caleb's people, the Steelbacks, were growing, both in number and in legend. They came from slums, broken suburbs, and collapsed rural towns. They were janitors, welders, mechanics, cafeteria workers, and dropouts. Society had once called them expendable. But under Caleb's watch, they trained like soldiers of grit and ghosts. There were no drills for formation or pageantry, only one rule. Stand with your back to the fear. The name wasn't a title, it was a promise, and promises mattered when nightmares hunted your mind. So the Zarn escalated again. From the sterile pens of their dread labs came the Whisperers, telepathic wraiths bred for one purpose, to pierce the soul. They didn't speak. They entered. Minds buckled under their scrutiny. Some screamed themselves blind. Others tore out their own throats. Resistance was meaningless, until they reached Caleb Rourke. The first Whisperer touched his consciousness, and recoiled. What it found wasn't a battlefield, it was a furnace. Layer upon layer of rage and memory pressed like sediment in a collapsed star. Foreclosures, pink slips, cold winters without heating, the sound of a best friend's skull cracking on the factory floor, the hiss of water when the plant's boiler exploded, the funeral where no one came, the hunger, the humiliation, the rage that had no outlet. All of it. And beneath it, something worse. Acceptance. Caleb Rourke had stopped being afraid a long time ago. The Whisperers screamed. Their minds, invasive by nature, couldn't endure what they'd never encountered. A man who had made peace with pain. A mind that didn't flinch when exposed to darkness because it had been born in it. They convulsed mid-air, writhing like dying animals, before collapsing, twitching, frothing, broken. And the only sound left was Caleb lighting another match off his thumbnail and saying to no one in particular, "Thought so." In the command ship above, Jerox didn't speak. Protocol demanded he remain above planetary conflict. But protocol was for victories. This was something else. And so, with two hearts beating unsteadily in his chest, the Zarn commander prepared for descent. Not as a conqueror, but as a witness. The wind moved through the skeletal towers of downtown Chicago like a ghost, unsure of its own death. Black glass facades hung in shards, reflecting a sky smeared with chemical scars. The bones of the city were broken, but they hadn't rotted. They waited, silent and watchful, as if they knew what was coming. Caleb Rourke stood where Lakeshore Drive used to be. The street beneath his boots was cracked open like a fault line. His knuckles were split, caked with dried blood that wasn't all his. Ash crusted in his beard. His coat, once a factory-issued utility jacket, now draped from him like a battle flag, torn, soot-stained, bullet-scored. He hadn't shaved in weeks, hadn't slept properly in longer. But his eyes were clear, iron-cold, focused. Across from him landed the Zarn shuttle with the grace of a scalpel. From its hatch stepped Captain Jerox, flanked by two enforcers clad in obsidian armor, faces hidden behind biohelmets humming with ambient dread. The Zarn commander approached slowly, his silhouette tall and glassy beneath the overcast light. A twitch in his jaw betrayed the calculation behind his every move. "I admire your defiance," Jerox said. The words poured like oil from his mandibles. "Most species, by now, are weeping, praying, but not you. You resist. That is valuable." He extended an open claw, a gesture of conditional peace. "Join us. You could lead your kind to a gentler outcome. This doesn't need to end in annihilation." Caleb tilted his head. For a moment, he looked almost curious. Then his voice came low, steady. "You don't get it, do you?" Jerox paused. "Clarify. You think fear is your weapon, that terror breaks people. But you dropped your gas on a world where school kids run active shooter drills by 3rd grade, where we teach our sons not to cry when they watch their fathers lose everything to layoffs and lawsuits. You aimed a nightmare cannon at a population already living in one." He took a step forward. No guards, no armor. Just a man, worn down to the raw, unbreakable truth. "You didn't invade a planet," Caleb said. "You walked into a trauma factory." His eyes locked onto Jerox's. "And I'm the shift supervisor." Before the captain could blink, the punch landed. A single hammer blow. It cracked Jerox's skull plate with the sound of wet stone. The Zarn staggered, stumbling backward, blood like motor oil pouring down his robes. Caleb grabbed the captain's sidearm before the guards could even react, flipped it backward and fired. 2 guards dropped. No war cry, no speech, just a motion forward, decisive, inevitable. And behind him, the people rose. He never took the spotlight. Caleb Rourke refused medals like he refused pity. They tried naming cities after him, offering parades and permanent seats in world councils. He turned them all down. "I didn't win a war," he told a reporter once. "I just remembered how to stand when everyone else forgot." He returned to Sector 19, a ruin of girders and rust and shattered concrete. There, he built nothing grand, just a bench, made it himself from rebar and old scaffolding. Some mornings, kids would find him there, silent, sipping bitter instant coffee, watching the sunrise through the haze. A cigarette burned slow in one hand. The other always rested on his knee, twitching with old pain. Legends spread beyond Earth. On distant colonies and Zarn-controlled moons, soldiers still told the story of the human who smiled at fear gas, of the man who walked through psychological weapons like they were fog machines, the one who stared into a drone's lens and said, "Come on down." But in the memory of those who knew him, not through stories or propaganda, but in blood, in soot, in silence, Caleb Rourke remained something deeper, not a hero, a mirror, proof that fear is not a chain but a crucible, and some men come out forged. Caleb didn't destroy the Zarn because he was fearless. He destroyed them because he understood fear, had worked beside it, beneath it, within it for decades, in the factories, in the debt, in the cold silence of a world that forgets its laborers. That pain didn't break him. It built him. And in the end, it wasn't steel or strategy that saved humanity. It was familiarity with suffering, and a man who remembered what it meant to endure.